Lots of October birthdays in the room, isn't there? Melissa, Mary Beth, Emily. There's others too. Who did I miss? Yeah, Sharon. Mine was, a week and a half ago, something like that. I guess Emily and I are exactly a week apart. Emily is about the only child's birthday that I can keep track of. Um, and so things happen around birthdays. You ever notice this? I had an eye appointment this week. Glasses. Went into the eye doctor. And you know, the timing of things sometimes is what causes me grief. It's not the information. It's the timing of things right around this stupid birthday. And I went in, and he asked me, he said, so has anything changed in your vision since the last time you were in 5 years ago? He emphasized that last part, 5 years ago. And I said, just a second, Doc, you know, you specialists think that health begins and ends with your specialty. You ever notice that? I said, it doesn't matter what specialist I go to, you think that my life will only be complete because of your contribution to it. And he says, well, I don't think it's all that. And I said, no, understand, I collect specialists as a hobby. I said, I've got an oncologist for indolent lymphoma. I've got a cardiologist for general cardiac health, but really who is nothing more than a glorified plumber. I've got an electrophysiologist who also is a cardiac physician, but he is nothing more than really a glorified electrician. I've got a nephrologist because cardiologists hate kidneys. I've got a urologist because, well, every trip to the restroom is like a waterlogged SOS sent in Morse code. And and we won't even talk about the kidney stones. By the way, no one wants to take credit for that one, not the nephrologist, not the urologist. It's always somebody else's fault. You see, I've also got a pulmonologist as well as several anesthesiologists. I've got a neurologist as well from when I had epilepsy as a child. And since I've met my deductibles for the year, I've got a psychologist. Then, of course, there's my general practitioner, right, who's been given the lovely task of trying to keep all of this working in concert. And recently, her job has been trying to figure out how to get rid of a staph infection from surgery 4 months ago. It's the surgery that never ends. Now, to all of these other specialists, I may need to add an infectious disease control as well as someone who deals with wound management. Right? This is what happens right around birthdays. And of course, this always leads me to the army of phlebotomists. I practice saying that, just so you know. The army of phlebotomists who regularly draw labs and who I am convinced actually cannot go into sunlight and regularly sleep in coffins until night. And then there are the dentists and the oral hygienists whose only job is to remind me that I don't floss well enough and that I probably shouldn't use my own Dremel to take off the rough edges where that crown fell out and all I've got is the base. They think I need it. I don't. It's great for holding highlighters and pens. I just stick it right there. Which brings me all back to my eye doctor. Honestly, I don't know if he's an an optician, an optometrist, or an ophthalmologist. All I know is that he thought I shouldn't have waited 5 years to come and see him. Specialist, right? And he wanted to know if anything had changed. I said, well, actually, I've got this thing happening where if I'm reading, and then I look up, my eyes won't focus. Drives me nuts. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, and I was holding the book, right? I take a book wherever I go. I was holding the book. I said, so the other day, I was reading this, but I had to keep glancing up to make sure I was obeying the traffic laws. And I said, and my eyes wouldn't focus, and at times I couldn't tell if it was red or green and how close that car was. And I said, so it was so frustrating, so I blinked and wiped my eyes and everything. And I said, and when that happened, I spilled the bowl of cereal, and it really ticked me off. And I'll tell you what I discovered. Eye doctors don't have a sense of humor. Because when I looked at him, he was just looking at me, blinking. Like he did not know what to do with that. And then, joke was on me, then he leaned in, completely deadpan, sounding like Ferris Bueller's teacher, and he puts his hand on my knee, pats my knee, and he says, now, Jeff, things sometimes change as we age. Yeah, he needs a new pair of eyeglasses from that moment. Isn't that how it goes? Apparently now I need a geriatrician because the eye doctor said so. Because things happen as we age. Isn't this how it goes? Do you ever feel it? And it just becomes, you're just like, I'm so over this. I think I heard it the other day. I'll blame Susan Smith since she's in line of sight. I think she actually said this, but she made some comment about how this whole retired age of someone calling it the golden years, and some comments that came out of her mouth had to do with they are liars and they need strung up, whoever called these the golden years. And so here I am. I gladly admit that I'm not old. My wife laughs. But I'm at this weird point, too, where I don't think I get to say I'm young anymore. Acting juvenile is one thing. It's a whole different thing. But I'm at this weird point in my life. And I'm beginning to measure the history of my life and memories in decades. Isn't that weird? And I'm measuring the future in half decades. Like, I don't make real long-term plans anymore. You know, this is where we are. This is what happens when we age. And we live in a culture that, for the most part, doesn't really prize maturity the way that we used to, or the aged, the wizened, the elders. Of course, we live much longer than we used to live, by a lot. By a lot. And we live longer with very life-threatening diseases. So we have more to complain about is what that means. Because this is what we're dealing with. This is the aging process. And sometimes our minds outlive our bodies, or our body's usefulness, and you feel that in you're like, I don't feel this old, but my body is saying you're this old. And sometimes our bodies outlive our minds as we lose the things that used to define us, aging. And none of it seems fair. But then someone too young dies tragically. And we're like, now that's not fair. That's not right. And so we spend a lot of time talking about what's fair and what's not fair. And my kids will tell you one of my favorite lines in our home is, life's not fair and then you die. And that really is the aging process. It's that reality that sinks in on us. You know, some tragedy that sneaks in unexpected. That person who seems like they have their life all together is suddenly found unresponsive next to a bottle of open pills or whatever other device. Life and death, growing up, growing old, it's hard work, isn't it? And we try in these moments to remind ourselves that even the horrors of this death, whether it is cancer or suicide, disease, claims so many. It's not fair. It's not right. And sometimes we grow weary of that never-ending cycle of just simply staying alive. This is life. That's at least what we term this. All of this. It's all just life. That seems like such a small word for such a convoluted and big reality, life. We speak of seasons and cycles, patterns and rhythms. We look at our bad days. We look at our good days, those years that we can't seem to escape, and the years that we can never get back. It's the father or the mother who knows that they should feel grateful and fulfilled when their elementary-aged kids are screaming and defiant. You know, you feel guilty because you're not enjoying the moment. And everybody's screaming. Those moments when they're yelling and crying, they can't stand anything you make for dinner, and somehow manage to blow through another diaper in the car seat that you just finally got reassembled after the previous kid had vomited all over it and somehow got the vomit in the lining of the ceiling of your car. You've been there. And it's a crazy cycle. And you know in those moments, you're like, yeah, this is life. And you know as a mother or a father, you should feel grateful for it, but you're having troubles. And then some wizened empty nester comes up and says, oh, honey, these are precious moments. Just enjoy these moments, right? And all you can think about is whether or not there will be nursery provided at their funeral. Right? You know those moments. Life. The church is supposed to be where life is lived. We have specialized, it seems, in the church in preparing people to not live. We prepare them for death. We spend a lot of time. I'm all about heaven. Looking forward to it. Lots to do, lots to see, can't wait. But we spend all of our time preparing people to get to heaven and not a really good job preparing people to live life. And then we turn around and we say, but God gives you life and life in abundance. And you're like, well, that stinks. Because if this is what life is, I'm not sure I want it in abundance. I think in the church we've got to do a better job of teaching people how to live and not just how to die. And so that's what this message is, with all of the stupid intros and the goofy stories and all of this. It's intended to help guide us to life. And isn't that what the book of Proverbs is about? It's wisdom. Do you know we probably will not be reciting these Proverbs in heaven? Because there's going to be stuff we're going to have figured out by now. So these Proverbs really are for life. And so this is why it brings us to this point where the last of our series of these 4 weeks on the book of Proverbs comes to this point about growing up and growing old, because life is meant to be lived. This is our job. You see, the heart of the passages that we've read every single week over these past 4 weeks has centered around a theme, or in some instances a word. And if you paid attention, that word was once again present in this passage. We've referred to it before, but chapter 9 it tells us that the beginning of wisdom is actually the fear of the Lord. But there's the word, the beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. That word, beginning, it keeps taking us back to the beginning. Reshit in the Hebrew. And here it is in this passage again. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me. Now, this is wisdom speaking. By me, wisdom says, your days will be multiplied and years will be added to your life. Maybe back 3-4 weeks ago, you'll remember this. There's a difference between a proverb and a promise. And it bears mentioning even in this passage. When wisdom says, for by me your days will be multiplied and years will be added to your life, is that a promise or a proverb? It's a proverb. Do things happen? Do people die out of turn? Do lives get cut short? Absolutely. But the point of this is if you listen to wisdom's voice, your life will be lived and not just endured. How many of us endure life? Here the author is returning us to that fundamental theme of reverence for God. And with this theme comes that reminder of that beginning, that before there was a beginning, there was God. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. But before the beginning, there was God. Which means in the beginning, when God did everything that God did, everything comes to us as gift. We bring nothing. We leave nothing. This is the story. So this is why it's important, because if we go back to the beginning and we realize everything is from God, then we begin to realize that everything is grace. It's all grace. And rather than us feeling like in the foolishness of this age that we need to make things happen, we need to create, we need to make our lives be what they need to be, we understand that everything that we are doing is a gift from God, and we are to be stewards of that grace. It's all gift. So all these themes come to play once again in this passage, but even as these themes wrap around each other and around this passage, there's something that continues to stick out to me about this thing called life, to quote Prince. Dearly beloved. Anyway, sorry. But there's some things that stick out to me about this thing called life. In this passage, Lady Wisdom keeps inviting us back to the beginning, back to the drawing board, so that our lives can be lived, not just endured. But with this comes this motif of building a house. Did you see it in the passage? It's actually where the passage started, right at the beginning of Proverbs chapter 9. Those first few verses, wisdom has built her house, has hewn its pillars. 7 pillars. Did you see that? 7 pillars. How weird. You're like, okay, is this like a Greek Parthenon? Did I say that right? Is this like an Acropolis? Is this Greek architecture? Here's really what's going on. It's talking about foundations. Right? It's talking about this house that has been built on foundations. And why 7? Because every time 7 comes up in Scripture, every time, it's referring to a sense of completeness, fullness. Sometimes we translate it as perfection, but our understanding of perfection in the West doesn't help us with that, because we think perfect is you can't add to anything. It's perfect. You can't improve, you can't take away. It's absolutely perfect. That's not the Middle and Near Eastern concept of perfect or completion. The illustration I always give is using one of my kids to make this point. Since Emily just had a birthday, what was it, 14? Okay, she did not respond, and I panicked. Got it right. But she just had her 14th birthday, and here's what I can say about Emily, our youngest daughter. She's a perfect 14-year-old, right? She does things that are completely appropriate for a 14-year-old. Does that mean she's perfect? No. And does that mean some 14-year-old behaviors aren't going to need to change? See there, this is the idea. Even in creation, if we go back to the beginning, we've got to understand, if we're going to apply this concept of perfect even to creation, we would have to say that creation was left imperfect. Because after those 7 days, remember the command God gave humanity in the beginning was to be fruitful, multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it. Bring it under order. There was something undone in creation, yet it was complete. And this is the role. This is what wisdom invites us into. In this house that is built, that's perfect, but not that it can't change, not that it can't adapt, not that you aren't invited. You see, this concept of perfect means that it's the perfect place for us to grow with all of our imperfections. The house that wisdom has built. and the table that wisdom has prepared. She has slaughtered her beasts. This isn't sacrifice. It's choice meat. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has set her table. You see how this works? You know how it works in your home. Everyone lives under the same roof. In our home, you've got the mom who rules the roost. You've got the poor dad who is abused and should be felt sorry for, never gets his way, though she drove out the other night to get me peach cobbler because I had a craving. We're expecting. So in our home, there it is. This is going to surprise you, but Dana and I have very different opinions on things. Yeah, she has very strong opinions, and she's wrong, usually. No. See, that went over like a lead balloon. Here we are. We've got different minds. We've got different opinions. We sometimes talk about our opinions vigorously. Right? And then I've got 4 kids. Whoo, buddy. Right? We were at the zoo on Friday, and we walked. All of our kids are upstairs, and we walked into one of the big houses of, I don't even know, primates or whatever, reptiles, I can't remember. And I walked in, and I said, it smells like walking down the hallway where the kids' wing is, and yeah. So we've got all of this going on in our home. Very different people. Very different stages of life, very different growths, all very different. One table. One table. This is what wisdom has done. Wisdom has set a table. It doesn't mean everybody that comes to the table is the same. In fact, it means the exact opposite. The table is the place where we are unified, but not made the same. We are made whole. The table. We all eat the same meal. We all shared the same responsibilities, the table. And wisdom has set a table. And she she sent out her criers into the street. Bring them in. They're crying out, bring them in. And specifically, bring in the simple. Everyone's welcome at this table. You see, wisdom's table is where life begins to make sense. If wisdom doesn't set her table, then life is very fragmented, very, very, very disassociated from itself. So it's at wisdom's table that life is lived. It's at wisdom's table that the young are instructed. And the young are instructed, not just instructed, but instructed by the aged, rather than being shuffled off so as not to disturb the grown-ups. At wisdom's table, there is no children's table. Everybody shares one table. And this is part of what wisdom's table is for. Why do the young come? Why do the simple? Why do the ignorant come? So that they may learn from the elders. But what do we do so often in the church is we shuffle them off because we don't want them to disturb us. They might try to eat the meal by putting black olives on their fingertips. And that's just not how you do it because we didn't do it that way when we were kids. We shuffle them away. At wisdom's table, the young are invited and they are instructed rather than being silenced and being removed from sight, out of mind. Children are meant to be seen, not heard. Can I tell you, there are things in our past that are just plain stupid, and that's one of them. At wisdom's table, the old listen to the young, rather than dismissing their voice as irrelevant because it sounds different than what they are accustomed to. Notice wisdom's table invitation is specifically for the simple. We just want the mature to come. Oh, you're not there yet? You can go eat over there. Wisdom's table is where the old actually listen to the young. The young are instructed by the old, but the old do not presume to know all that is worth knowing. They actually listen. At wisdom's table, you see, the powerful and the weak sit together. There is one head to wisdom's table, and it's none of us. The head of the table belongs to God. What that means is we are all guests at the table. It is all grace. It is all gift. And so we all come equally to the table. We all eat the same food. Power, prestige, office, authority has no place at this table. That belongs to God. We all come around this common table. At wisdom's table, all eat the same food, all experience the same grace, and all bring the exact same gift to the meal. Nothing but themselves. Yeah, this is wisdom's table. And I know the world operates on a different system, a system of power and authority, and these things cannot be avoided. But wisdom's table, prepared like a feast that belongs to God's future kingdom, has no need of power brokers. You see, at wisdom's table, you are invited to eat. But whenever we begin to treat the table as if we are the ones who have the power to invite or dismiss, or disinvite, to say who can participate and who cannot, to offer food like we have prepared it or like we caused it to be, then we become guilty of the same folly against which wisdom is singing. We dare not pretend that we are wise if we will not allow the simple to eat at wisdom's table. In that moment, it is we who fall into the stupidity and the futility of ignorance. So, wisdom has set a table, and everyone's invited. All stages and ages. So let me speak to some of those stages today. First, let me speak to the young. I don't know what this even means. What is young? What is old? I don't know. I'm basing this whole thing from my vantage point. So, younger than me. And I'm saying in categories like, well, I'm 47, Jeff, so I count in the younger than you. Well, shut up. I was 47 a few days ago. Whatever. All right? So, no, I'm talking about stages. So, the younger than me. Here's what I want you to know. Here's a principle I want you to get. Think more about others. Think more about others. Wisdom begins with selflessness. In this stage of life, it's easy to be consumed by personal ambitions, by dreams, by desires. But true wisdom requires us to step outside of our own bubble and consider the needs of those around us. Amen. There's Ginger, yes. And life is not just about making a living. It's about making a difference. And while it seems like our younger generations are very keen on finding a cause to get behind, we're always looking for a cause, another cause, it seems also like there is a considerable lack of consistency. Every cause becomes an opportunity for another GoFundMe account. Every trend becomes a fad that consumes you for a moment and then vanishes in the ether of boredom. We have a generation of bored people. Every opinion you have seems to be mistaken as a fact, and facts themselves seem to be little more than relativistic opinions. The view you have of the world in this age of so-called authenticity, that is the key word for this age, authenticity. This view you have of the world is often skewed beyond recognition. What you call authenticity is often little more than mockery. It may not be your authentic self to go to work on time, or to respect authority, or to care enough to change out of your pajamas by 3 p.m. But that's kind of the point. Kind of the point. Authenticity does not give you permission to shirk responsibility. Your generation tends to speak the most loudly about community. This is something we hear from the younger crowd, community and causes and living in an ever-shrinking world. And all of this is true and it's necessary. Yet in an ironic twist, you expect the world to adapt to your authentic self, rather than you participating in the world in an authentic way. So, here's something practical to the young among us. I want you to use a phrase less often. The phrase is this: I feel, then fill in the blank. It's therapeutic language. We learned this in the counselor's office. I feel like such and such when you fill in the blank, or whatever it might be. We have taken this I feel sentiment and we have built the world around everybody's individuated feelings. I'm not saying they're not legitimate. I'm not saying don't feel. And I'm not saying divorce yourself from these things. What I'm saying is add a phrase to your vocabulary. Not just I feel, but let's think too. I think. I think. Thinking is important as well. Feeling and thinking together are a force to be reckoned with. So, I would challenge you, use the phrase I feel less, because you are viewing the world through how it makes you feel. And guess what? Life's not fair and then you die. Sometimes the world is not going to have you feeling all peaches and cream. You with me so far? So that's to the young. Here's the principle. Think more about others. Now, to the middle-aged, to the middle-aged, midlife crises, existential, self-involved people that think that every thought that comes out of their head is profound. Let me offer some words like they're profound. Here we are. This is my category. I'm nothing more, it seems at times, than a middle-aged skin sack of existential angst. So to these people in this group, while the young, I said, think about others more. To this age group, I want to say this. Think about yourself less. Think about yourself less. We are the ones who are arriving at that point in our lives where we have been adults for more than half of our life. And we're not sure how we got here. And I didn't mean to be an adult, but somehow it happened. And now I've been one for long enough to have maybe figured some things out. But inside, I feel like I've figured out nothing at all. And we're a mess. We're a mess, and we get these things in our head, and we disappear inside of our thoughts, and we think that the world is revolving around us. We live in this kind of anti-Copernican revolution. Rather than the cosmos spinning around the sun, or our solar system spinning around the sun, we begin to think that life revolves around us and my thoughts and how hollow I feel, and wondering what I have accomplished, and now I'm just going to die. And nobody even cares, right? This is coming from one of those people. And our bodies are changing. I swear midlife is like a second go at puberty. Like our bodies are going, we didn't get it right the first time, let's try it again, you know? And we spend a lot of time looking in the mirror, wondering where the hair on the top of our heads went, and then looking up and realizing it all went into our noses. Or down our backs, like, what is going on? Our bodies are betraying us. I used to eat for breakfast 2 raspberry zingers and a Mountain Dew, and I can't do that now without getting the cold sweats and the shakes. So here we are. We come to this point in our midlife, and we're asking all of these questions, all of these unfulfilled realities in our life. And we begin to look at how unfair it all is. We are the generation who has perfected blaming someone else for our problems. Well, the reason I live in my mother's basement is because you didn't pay for my college bills. What? Right? We have perfected blaming others for our problems, and we live in this reality where it seems like our life is the only thing that really matters, and we expect everybody to bend around us. This season of life is one that is given to introspection, which often causes an inward shift in the way that we approach life. And so while introspection is good, and while taking measure of what really matters in life is necessary, be careful. Be careful, because that shift can easily cause an extreme selfishness that will cause devastation in everyone's life around you. The world, the cosmos, does not revolve around you. So here's something practical. You are in a season when you are questioning your basic convictions. You're asking questions like, why have I always believed this? What does this even mean? Does any of this even matter? There is a kind of energy in this that will reshape you. But like any source of power, it must be applied in careful ways, lest it destroy you. So, you are seeking meaning and purpose, peace in your own mind. You must take time to listen and not just be heard. This is for the midlifers. Listen. You don't just need to be heard. You need to listen. Listen to the voices of the aged. They have been where you're at, and they might know a way through it. Listen to the voices of the people around you, your family. They're living this with you. Listen to what they're saying. Pay attention. They may be saying something that will affect how you see yourself the rest of your life. Listen. And maybe in the craziness of your life, stop and listen to nature. Stop and listen to the rain on the window. Listen. Maybe stop and listen to the birds, or maybe stop and listen to an entire album of music. Listen. Listen. Listen, because the people that you are listening to and putting into your heart and your life, they are going to be the ones who continue to shape you, and they've got to live with you. Listen. So to the young, think more about others. To the mid-aged, think less about yourself. And finally, to the aged, the old, plan for someone else's future, not just your own. Young, think less of yourself. Young, think more of others. Mid, think less of yourself. The aged, plan for someone else's future. Do you remember the world you grew up in? We do, because you've told us about it a lot. And we know the world's horrible. And it's not 1950. And you lived in Mayberry. And it was hard. We know it was hard, but somehow you have forgotten how hard it was. And you have painted your narrative with pastels, and that was not always the case. This is what happens as we age. We recast our stories. And you have forgotten. I'm not saying don't remember, but I am asking you to remember correctly. Because if you're going to tell these stories and then demand that we return to them, you've got to own the whole story. And maybe this is really the point. Plan for someone else's future. Rather than insisting that we all return to the world of your youth, maybe you need to plan on preparing the world for the youths that are around you. You are the ones who know that eternity is right in front of you. You are the ones that are thinking about this, and you're planning for your eternity, but will you plan for someone else's future? You see, it's not about going back to that day and that age. It is about reminding us of the things that were done well and the things that were not done so well, so that maybe we can do better or different. And different isn't bad. So I say to the aged, don't forget, or better, remember correctly. Do not think that what this world needs is a return to that world. Do you remember that world? That world where there were party line telephones, where cars didn't have heating in the seats. That world, meals where nothing was wasted because you could afford to waste nothing. Where a ham bone became the next night's dinner, right? That world where there was a simple religion with fire and brimstone kind of preaching and annual revival meetings. The world where the fear of just wait until your father gets home was a real thing. Part of the appeal of that world was its simplicity, but have we forgotten? That world may have been good for you, but if you were black, it was not a good world. Have you forgotten the abuse cycles that were rampant? Have you forgotten that? Have we forgotten about the wars that shaped us? Of course, the previous generation, the greatest generation, so they say, fought a global war that we knew what we were doing. We knew why we were doing it. Instead, our current generation of elderly went to a war that no one quite understood because their country called and they came back villainized. Have you forgotten that world? You see, it wasn't all easy. We can't forget these things because, let me say this in a way that you hear, because while we're not doing everything right today, neither are we doing everything wrong. But all we hear is what we're doing wrong. You see, it's not enough for the aged population to wash their hands of social responsibility with the cowardly expression of, well, I'll be dead in a few years and won't have to deal with it. That's cowardice, is what that is. If you would dare say that, and then in the same breath turn around and kiss your granddaughter's head and tell her that you love her, you are either, at best, a hypocrite or at worst, a liar. Plan for someone else's future. So there it is, to the young, think more about others. To the mid, think less about yourself. To the aged, plan for someone else's future. So, in the end, let me tell you what I think this table looks like. Actually, Douglas is going to help. Here's what I think this table looks like. It's one of my favorite images. You've seen it out in the foyer. If I were in shorts, you'd see it on my leg. No one deserves to see me in shorts. When I was quite a bit younger, I made a foolish decision that was a permanent decision, and I needed to get it covered up, and I covered it up with this. Oh, and it's big, too, for those of you that are like tattoos are of the devil. It's huge, but my legs are skinny. So it's all relative. But here it is. It's called Trinity. I love this image so much. This is what the table of wisdom looks like. Notice, there's three persons present. Red, the Father. Yellow, the Son. Blue, the Spirit. Do you see it? And then these cups, these chalices, where they overlap. You notice the red, the yellow, and the blue, those are primary colors. The Godhead. 3 in 1, primary colors. Now, notice what happens. Where they overlap, all the other colors of the rainbow begin to emerge. Everything comes out of this. It's all grace. It's all grace. It's all gift. And then right in the middle, it didn't show up well on this, but right in the middle where all of the colors are present is supposed to be the white light, the Godhead, who is light itself. Beautiful. But it's the cups and the hands, each pouring into another. This is what wisdom's table looks like. You see, when we stop pouring into others' cups, when we start inviting and disinviting, when we say who's welcome at the table, and we stop serving, you notice what happens. The cup next to you stops being filled. And then that person has to serve themselves, which then stops the next one. And now that person has to serve themselves. And pretty soon we end up in a world where everybody serves himself. Wisdom's table says if everybody pours in someone else's cup, everybody is served. We need all of our voices at the table. We need the young. We need the mid-aged. We need the older folks. We need all voices at the table because if one is missing, the table falls apart. So, as we come to the end, I want to finish with some lyrics from a song. I mentioned earlier about the Jim Crow era of here in America, that sometimes we have forgotten that was not that long ago. Well, that was so long ago. We're like, well, sing the old hymns. And then we get, and we do or we don't, and then we get to this thing and we're like, well, slavery, racism, that stopped a long time ago. And we've got this idea that the old hymns that were written during that time, like How Great Thou Art, are old, but this is so old that we've stopped remembering it. So there was a movie a while ago, maybe you saw it, Selma. Did you see that movie? Selma. Great movie about Martin Luther King Jr.'s march across the Selma Bridge. What was it, March 7th in 65, something like that. And it tells the story. Well, I'm not going to retell the story, but there was a song that went with this movie. It was written by John Legend, piano player, vocalist, as well as Common, a rapper. I'm guessing, looking at my crowd, that you may not know him. But the song gives me chills every time I hear it. It's called Glory. And I just want to read this last verse because I think it's for us. Here's what he says. I'm not going to rap. You're welcome. He says, Selma's now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They marched with the torch. We're going to run with it now. Never look back. We've gone hundreds of miles from dark roads. He rose to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, the power was the people. Enemy is lethal. A king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. Whew, that gets me every time. How dare we put those things together? And then this, the biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing our music. That's the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream, we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. Here it is. It takes the wisdom of the elders and the young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory. Isn't that good? Woo! We need every voice. We need the elders' wisdom. We need the youth we need the energy of youth and the victory of the table that wisdom sets. The meal that Jesus provides becomes the victory in the world around us.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls,